Good morning. I almost said it's January, but it's February 7th. And we're discussing Minyan by David Bezmogis. And I think that we've read other short stories by him. I'm not exactly sure which. And let me show you what he looks like. This is easier now. You can all see his, he looks like a young guy. He's Russian. I'll give you his bio in a minute here. Okay. And let me tell you a little bit about him. David Bezmogis is an award-winning writer and filmmaker. He is the author of the story collection Immigrant City and Natasha and Other Stories. Our story Minyan is from Natasha and Other Stories. And the novels, The Betrayers and The Free World. I feel like we've read something by him. I can't put my finger on it. David's stories have appeared in numerous publications, The New Yorkers, blah, blah. His books have been nominated for the Scotia Bank Giller Prize, never heard of it, the Governor General's Award, the Trillium Prize, and the Amazon.ca First Novel Award. Okay, I've not heard of any of those. The National Book Award, I've heard of that. In the summer of 2010, I'll tell you about the National Book Award. You have to pay $500. And then I think you get mentioned there, which I just think it diminishes the award for me. Okay. Izzy, it's so good to see you back. I'm on mute.
It's good to see you back too. It took me a long time just to find the spot. I'm not used to it. Thank you for everybody.
Well, you look good.
Thank you. Thank you. So do you. Thanks.
Thank you. A graduate of the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts, David's first feature film was Victoria Day, and it was at Sundance. He was born in Riga, Latvia, former USSR. David lives in Toronto, which we could see from the story, where he's the creative director of the Humber School for Writers. So, I think he's an interesting guy, and we'll have to see now what you think of the story. Why was it called The Minyan? Why do you think he gave it that title?
If they needed a minion to in the apartment building of the old Russians.
Right. Judy.
I loved this story, and I loved the author. I thought it was a great read. It was a just beautiful read. But the 4 last sentences are the story, except for one thing. He didn't add women.
Well, hello.
I mean, he was naming liars and thieves and murderers. Could have added women. They could have helped with the Minyan.
I know.
Too. But I love the story.
But in Orthodox, they can't.
But I loved it.
Yeah.
All right.
But in Orthodox, they can't,
Judy,
right?
Judy, can you just repeat it? Lynn is coming on. Tell her that you love the story.
Okay, I love the story, and I love the author. And the last 4 sentences were great, except I wanted him to add women, and I'm making a joke of it. But truthfully, the homosexuals, murderers, liars, and thieves, and they didn't add women. I mean, go ahead, be complete.
There's a new, they call it a rabbah at Moriah, and she's a woman rabbi. Now, in Orthodox, there's a couple things rabbis can't do. They can't say Baruch Hu, women rabbis. Women can't say Baruch Hu. They can't say, I don't know if they could do, I think they could do Kaddish. They can't be an ed. They can't be a witness at a wedding. And there's a few other things. So I saw somebody who goes to that congregation and go, how's the new rabbah? Oh, I really like her. And I said, but does she do everything? He goes, well, she does everything a rabbi does. I go, oh, she does Baruch Hu? And he's like, well, no, she can't do that. And I'm like, that's what rabbis do. And then I shut it down. Like, I kind of want to go on a Saturday morning. I'd have to be excused from Torah study because I want to see what she's like. Susan.
Well, I love this story too. There were so many parts about it that hit home for me. And I just loved it. And it was like I couldn't put it down. Uh, and so Judy, I agree with you too about the woman thing. I also noticed that. But the thing too was it showed me the importance of community and how important it is for people to join together, and it also brought up what loneliness does.
Yes.
And for any of us who have experienced that, it really sits home.
Yeah. I didn't think about that, Susan, until you said that, and you're absolutely right. My mom is a widower, and my dad died almost 2 years ago, and she's super lonely, and she doesn't always admit it. Okay, I have Alice. I see Beverly, Sandy, Lynn.
Okay,
Alice.
what I was gonna say, I agree with Judy and Susan. I really enjoyed it. It was a serious topic, as you alluded to, Susan, about, being alone and how to deal with it. But he had a really nice way of putting in some humorous things about, how things would be in Russia. And it just had, it was very realistic to me, the way a family would respond to this. And I agree. I just liked the tone, again, that it was serious, but he put in these little humorous notes that made me want to keep going with it.
Interesting. Beverly. Oh, wait a minute. All right, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, my take on it was really the same. I really loved the story, and it was very serious in lots and lots of ways. It's serious about how to get an apartment, serious about this loneliness and all of those things. But he had so many lines that were so funny. It isn't often that I read things and makes me smile. Like even on the first page, he starts when he says, "At least in Russia, you knew who to bribe." Right away, he's, and then on the next 2 pages, he says, "You had to get the right kind of resident, a spiritual ringer." I just loved his humor. But the Minyan was the most important thing. And I think that is a key in Orthodoxy, that nothing else really mattered. What kind of a person you were on the inside, what your morals were, what your ethics are. If you were a Jewish body, you could make up the Minyan. And it's a real jab, I think, at Orthodoxy that he's making. And of course, the allusion to the fact that these men were lovers just seemed really ludicrous to me. But people talk, and that's another part of the story. They just make stuff up as they go along. I really like the story. I think it had a lot of depth.
We're going to come back to if they were homosexual. Sandy, you need to unmute.
I don't think it matters if they were homosexuals, and I don't think they should even assume that, but it doesn't matter. But having grown up Orthodox, this was very close to my heart. I just remember the women talking through the whole service, talking, kibitzing, gossiping about each other and what someone was wearing. And the men in front, I couldn't even go up and see my father or sit with my father. And I thought it was very well written. It was a great story. It had a lot of meat to it.
It did. Lynn.
I'm going to weigh in on the minority view
Did you
here.
see? I made
I
Judy.
didn't.
I said, repeat that. Lynn is finally on. Repeat what you said.
You asked me if I liked the story. I said,
I did.
no, I did not like this story. And I'll tell you why. And you know, my opinion is my opinion. So I usually go into a story looking for what the main idea is. What is he trying to communicate? What is his goal? First time through, I didn't get a thing, honestly. Second time through, I got some things, but I'm not sure that's even in the right direction. I felt that this was a total slam against elements of Judaism that are lacking in compassion, are lacking in understanding, are lacking in insight. These two men, I did not feel were homosexual. I felt that they were two men who were lonely and not of means, and they were resourceful enough to do something about it. The way that these people fought over an apartment and were so ready to cast Herschel out, I thought was despicable. I do think, you know, there's a statement in here, what kind of education did we get? And they keep on saying old Jews, all through the story, old Jews. Well, I think, and somebody said it, I think the character of the person is what is important in Judaism, and what he does. We talk about this in every story, deeds over words. And the words of these people at the end were, what does Herschel, why should he get this? What has he done? Why give homosexuals a place? The compassion, the honesty, the truth, the ethics were in Herschel and the narrator. And at one point I was wondering, whose story is this? Is this the narrator's story? It's the first person. Question is, how do we feel about the narrator in this story? Where does he weigh in on this story? So those are my feelings.
All right, I have Izzy, Evie, Sandy, Elaine, and Judy. Izzy, go.
Me. Okay, well, I'm sorry for my voice, but I thought it was a sad story, but it was poignant, and I couldn't stop reading it. And then I stopped and asked myself, what is the point of the story? I didn't understand. It took me a while to understand that they were spurning them because they thought they were homosexuals. And that really, really bothered me. And to me, that was kind of the theme of the whole thing, is that the Shiva represented everything coming together about the people who were so angry and mean and dismissive of them because they thought they were homosexual. And the other thing, I thought that the son, the grandfather's son, was acting as the narrator. He was the observer throughout the whole thing. He was the one who told us what was going on. I thought in a very fair observational way. But the thing that really got me was at the end when Yitzhak and Herschel were best friends, and the way that Yitzhak's son, when he came to the Shiva, talked so horribly about how Yitzhak was just this awful man. We didn't know how many brothers he had, brothers and sisters he had. He was really like a scumbag, a thief, and he had a lot of money. And my question is, how did Yitzhak get the apartment and not Herschel, who had nothing? And Herschel moved in, and Yitzhak was the one who had the money, and yet Herschel had all these incredibly wonderful things to say about Yitzhak that his son said just the exactly opposite. So there were lots of questions that I had. I thought they were true friends, and it was so meaningful that the little eulogy that he gave, I don't know, it was very poignant. And I had lots of questions, but it just seemed very ironic and beautiful at the end. They gave the apartment to Herschel, who deserved it probably more than Isaac did in the first place, who had money.
Yeah.
And that was the most beautiful part for me.
Yeah. Evie.
I love this story. I loved just watching the characters, and I almost felt like somebody that was on the fringe of a world that I really didn't know, but somehow was in my kishkis too, that I could sort of relate to. And being, the child of much older parents, I just felt that I was kind of in both worlds, but I also, as somebody who's really very sensitive to words, I was able to take this with such a grain of salt and just almost see the humor. I was not bothered by the lack of women in it, maybe because I was sort of used to that, going to an Orthodox day school and being separated, and it was never a problem. And I never thought about it at all. But I just love the flow of it, and I also could not put it down. It just kind of understanding the characters, or when I didn't understand them, okay, so what? I mean, I just on a lot of levels, I enjoyed it. But listening to what everybody is saying, I'm thinking, okay, there are certain things that I missed, but I'm so glad I read it.
Okay, good. All right, I see. So we have Sandy, Elaine, Judy, and then Joyce. Sandy.
Yeah, I understand where Lynn is coming from. And, it really is not a pretty picture of Judaism or a Jewish crowd. There's some really ugly stuff going on there. Some of the ways they're talking about it, I don't know if it's the son or one of the characters talks about the Jews as thieves and uses every bad word he can to describe the way they live. But I think, Lynn, that the author agrees with you. I think he just has a great way of writing this story. And I did enjoy reading it, but it was pretty disgusting at times. And I don't think that should bother you, because I think the author was agreeing with you, Lynn.
Well, I agree. He was agreeing with me. And I was sort of upset about that, because we have so few stories where the Jews come out as heroic, and the hero of the story, who is the hero of the story is the question. And I agree with many of you on terms of theme. I think the idea of community and the idea of a support system, but there is so much. I mean, they were talking about the Zalman who might be willing to manipulate the waiting list, or these undercurrents of lack of compassion. So the question is, what's redeeming? Who's redeeming in this story, and what can we take a hold of? Who's a success? That was mentioned. They were successful. And what's your worth in a community? Is your worth your money? Is your worth being able to manipulate? Is your power? Or is your worth your compassion and your character? And I guess if you present all those, it's a meaningful story. I guess maybe it's my mood and what's happening happening in the world.
Right. All right, Elaine.
Okay. I think if we all remember, there was a building on Hollywood right at Devon that was a senior center and I think a lot of old Russian Jews lived there. I remember taking someone from a JUF homeless shelter to try to get an apartment there. I think the story definitely, forget that they were Jews, that they definitely was typical of older people who are, yes, lonely, who are worried about their money, who are worried about where they're going to live. I think it was a very realistic presentation of people. And sometimes this group is very idealistic, and we want people to be compassionate and beautiful and wonderful because they're Jewish stories. And we are human beings. We are worried about our lives. I don't know whether the couple were homosexual or they just bonded together in the end. I don't think that really mattered that much. But I do think when people have nothing else to do, they do gossip a lot. And I think this was a realistic, not always pretty presentation of
All right.
people.
Okay. Joyce. No, Judy.
Well,
Then Joyce.
okay. I disagree with Lynn. And I think Lynn knows a lot nicer people than some of the people I know, because I thought this was more realistic than not. And I think people are unkind. And it's good to see that it's reflected in fiction that people are unkind so that you can react to it. The other thing is, he was a great writer. There is a sentence on page 465. I have to tell you, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words in it. And it's his posture was unmistakable grief. If that doesn't elicit an image and an emotion in someone, I don't know what does. I think his writing made us stay with it, whether you felt like Lynn did or you felt like I did. You stuck with it because he's a great writer. And the arguments that he brings up, the issues he brings up are universal. And they don't just apply to Jews. But it happened to be a story about Jews. And we could relate to some of the things that the Jewish people related to. But that doesn't, he's still entitled to write about negative things that Jews do so that the Jews can recognize it. You know, Weisselberg walked into temple on high holidays too. And he, you know, there are Jews that are bad. And it's good to see these stories so that you can talk about them and relate to them. And I mean, the loneliness part and wanting to find housing, those are basic needs.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. All right, Joyce. Now, Joyce.
Things that happen in a home for elderly people are very typical of middle school and high school. People revert, and the gossiping and the cliques that go on are so typical. It is, people do not change. You think that they do, but they don't.
Right.
I'll never forget my girlfriend's mother when she first moved into Whitehall. And regardless, I mean, and she was this very well-educated, refined, lovely, soft-spoken woman. And I had a conversation with her and she said, I don't understand why I am having trouble breaking into a clique. They are not accepting me. I said, then form your new clique.
It's kind of heartbreaking, yeah.
It was, yeah. and I had it with my own parents. I mean, it happens. What goes on is ridiculous, but the way it was depicted in this story was very typical and not just for Jews.
Yeah,
and I could relate. And I thought this story, I agree with what was said by everyone else. I thought it was very well written and I enjoyed it immensely.
Okay. All right, Susan.
Well, I think also one of the things that I thought was very poignant in this story was them having to adjust to a new culture and a new home. You take all these old Russian Jews who came to a new country and had to adjust the way they live and the way they were thinking. And I think that also, was an adjustment for them. But if this was, I didn't look at this as a slam against Jews. I looked at it as a slam against Orthodox Jews. And that was okay with me. As much as I hate to admit that.
All right, it's very, all right, yeah, listen, that's, I think it's a good point.
And
All
I
right,
just, but I think, part of it also was this adjustment to a new way of having to live.
yeah. Alice,
Yeah, oh gosh, I have so many things in my head. I really agree with what Elaine and Judy were saying about, it's just realistic about what people are like. But Susan, when I was listening to you saying a slam against orthodoxy, I'm not sure it is. In my mind, I'm not sure it is. This is what these people have, these are their lives. This is what they have used to get to live. And we all have different ways of coping with life, what life brings to us, the good, the bad. And I think the Orthodox, I'm not Orthodox. I never have been. I haven't been exposed to it that much, but I feel like the people who are in that community, that's what they, as I said, that's what they use to express their joys at a child being born, a bar mitzvah, a wedding, whatever, a funeral. They have their way of coping. I have my way of coping. I mean, what about non-Jews? To me, it wasn't so much a judgment. It was more a portrayal of this is how these people are coping with at this story of old age, losing a spouse, losing a best friend, trying to cope with being alone, trying to find a community. Yeah, it is hard. And with someone with not a lot of money to get into a place that, would accept them. So I just felt it was very realistic and not slamming anything, but just exposing what these people's lives and their beliefs were.
okay, I have Meryl, and then Terry, then Lynn. Meryl, go ahead.
The questions that they raised was, who wins if a Jew doesn't go to synagogue? And the answer is, I'll tell you who, Hitler.
Oh, that line was.
I thought that was very important.
Mine was great.
And I think that Zalman is heroic in this story because he said, God judges, I don't judge. And he'll let anyone who's Jewish come into the synagogue and be part of the minyan. That's all he wants to do, is keep the religion alive. And I thought it was kind of a slam against Russian Jews, older Russian Jews. My experience with the older Russian Jews, is because I taught them English, was that they got to be citizens and then they voted for Trump. So, I mean, it broke my heart. The whole thing broke my heart. But I think the point of this is that we're trying to keep Judaism alive. There's almost this desperation in Zalman's attitude that we must keep Judaism alive. It doesn't matter if there's liars or criminals or whatever they are. We need a minyan. So I thought he was a great character in the story.
Terry.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Zalman, because I marked a particular line that I thought was incredible in terms of the imagery. The list was, figuratively speaking, a cage. Old Jews peered out through its bars and stretched their plaintive hands out to Zalman for salvation. And I don't know, I almost felt a Holocaust imagery in that moment. Just because I was picturing the hands going through bars, and I think that I agree that Zalman really was a pivotal character in what went on in the story. I have a question that confused me. Where was the grandfather's apartment? Because he did, I don't ever remember reading that he got an apartment, but it says, on those mornings, I accompanied my grandfather back to his new apartment where we drank tea and played checkers. The new apartment was slightly smaller than the old. The brown sofa had been sold or replaced with the blue one. So I'm trying to figure this out. And I couldn't.
It's in, Zalman's where the Minyan is. So he got an apartment there because they were looking for a 10th Minyan. I see the other hands, but I do have to share this one thing. I try to do a deep dive. There was actually a theatrical release in March 2022, a portrait of Jewish and queer intergenerationality proposes collective agency as a version of
hope.
And I think that it's set in the 1980s, it's from 2004, but it talks about there's a quiet I think the son might have been queer, and it's a story about identification and disidentification, the parsing of potential lineages, vehicles of transmission, each with its own benefits and drawbacks. The context vary. Generally, available models of masculinity in the home or school tend to be forceful. Boxing is a running motif, hinting at both the need for self-defense and the cop-out of brutalization. In religion, David can look to Orthodox liturgical tradition or his grandfather's scavenger methodology. I listened to the old man. Now, I think it says here the son was a gay man. Now, I know that this was the last story in that one book, so I'm not sure if, if the other stories hint at this. Minyan attends to other lines of transmission as well as the interpersonal. There's a telling instance of that intimate queer archival form, the box under the bed, its contents, folded letters, physique photos, matchbooks with scrawled phone numbers, fragments of a less documented life. And the power of books is foregrounded on several occasions, whether the Talmud or Giovannini's room. So, maybe that's stuff that I remember reading that stuff. I didn't take those hints from it, but I do think that, there was a hinting that Herschel and Nitzig were homosexual, and that, that's why people didn't want to have anything to do with them. And as Joyce says, whether it was the clique or they didn't want to talk to them, I don't know. But that article puts a different light on it. Sandy and then Evie.
Great.
Well,
okay.
I had my hand up about 4 people back.
I just go, Sandy.
Yeah, because I really, I wanted to say pretty much the same thing Merle did. I really believe that is true, that we think badly of Zalman, that he's a man that takes bribes and stuff. And in the end, he turns out to be the hero of the story because he does give the apartment to Herschel. And the second thing is the fact that these are Russian Jews, and they're a certain class of Russian Jews. They're not the elite, the people that read Tolstoy or something like that. I saw this in Israel. There's all kinds of Russians, and some of them look down on the other Russians, and they would call them Yiddish names like the Grubiners or something. And they also look down on the Gruzhinim. So I think
those are people from Georgia, and I've met some Georgians, and there's some truth. There's always some truth to a stereotype.
Right. So it was showing you a stereotype of a certain kind of Russians. They weren't just Jews. They weren't the elite. They weren't supposed to be the German Jews or anything, who looked down on East European Jews. So it was a special group that hung around that synagogue, and the writer was portraying that. I don't think it was anti-Semitic or anything like that.
Yeah. Evie and then Lynn.
Yeah, I just thought it was a snapshot of a culture, and I don't think it was orthodoxy that he was bashing, and I just think it was more of a cultural norm in terms of the Minyan and so forth at that point. And somebody had mentioned about relating it to middle school, and I could see that. I could see it, with my grandchildren who were looking at colleges, and I remember from the nursery school days where there was a certain pecking order and certain ways where you could get around certain things. I think as ugly as it was, I think that was a certain reality, and I think he just took a snapshot of this scenario of a group of a demographic, and all of a sudden I was reminded when somebody had mentioned, I think Elaine had mentioned about the building on Devon and whatever it is, and I remember when my son, who was in high school at the time, was doing, I don't know, some kind of a tzedakah type of a thing. We're delivering all kinds of things to that building, and his heart was kind of broken in terms of what he saw. Came down and found in the 10 minutes that he was there, his car was booted and towed and so on and so forth. And then the anger that resulted from that. And then maybe 2 hours later, we're out to dinner someplace, and an African-American panhandler came up to him, and he immediately took out his wallet and gave him money. So I think all of these different scenarios pick on your emotions in terms of what you're reading or what you're seeing at the time. And I think it's all part of some big picture that we get different glimpses of.
Yeah. Lynn.
I don't know where to begin. I think there were so many fabulous comments here. I learned a lot from all of you, but I still disagree with some of you. Judy.
Yes. We're Jewish. We can all disagree.
Yeah.
Okay, Judy, what an author is entitled, you said that an author is entitled to give his view of the world, and that's quite true. A story, a piece of fiction, nonfiction, it's the author's vision of life, but also the reader brings to a story his life and his values, and I think I was particularly sensitive in this environment. I said that to you, that I thought it was lambasting Jews. I don't think it was lambasting Jews. I think it was lambasting human nature. After everything you guys have said, I agree with that. So the question is, what is in human nature now? I think he does it through, it is a Jewish story. The story is called Minyan. I mean, where else do you see that word except in Judaism? So to me, it is a Jewish story. But I think it's I was thinking about something Alice said in terms of the ways people cope. And I think everybody has their own rules of coping. I do it this way. I mean, we had this discussion this weekend about this, and I'm not going to go into that. But the question is, what values, and I have to say, I do not think Zalman is the hero of this story. End of 467. They should know I don't put a Jew who comes to synagogue in the street. Homosexuals, murderers, liars, thieves, take them all.
411.
442. Without them, we would never have a Minyan. What's more important? I mean, homosexuals.
Isn't that his point? Isn't that his point?
His point is we've lost the sense of how our characters should be. What rules do we follow in our lives? What choices do we make in our lives? And Elaine, I'm sorry, but I'm idealistic, and I think that character has slid in our environment. There is no sense of we used to have a uniform sense of values in America. I don't think that's the case anymore. And I think the story is about present day as much as it is about old Jews. I think it's about character. And I believe that the first person, the narrator, is the hero of the story. He comes to visit his grandfather every week. He takes concern about Herschel. I mean, the rules that we follow are the rules, to me, of the heart, rather than the rules in a book. So that's my opinion about this. And I know that all of you love the story. And actually, I have a greater appreciation of the story now because it really did. I think I'm glad I was the only person complaining here, because I think you all came out with some wonderful interpretations that really educated me.
Yeah, listen, if we all had the same opinion, this wouldn't be, a great story. Move on. I have Elaine, Izzy, Judy, and Meryl. Elaine.
Okay, I agree with Lynn, but I still stick to my point. I think the first thing that when Susan said something about loneliness and being a new widow that I am, I can definitely understand. And I think we are missing the point of these elderly Jews. Years ago, I did a tutor program for elderly Russian Jews. And you have to understand these people came over when they were older, and the transition is tremendous. They are not the young Russians who knew computers, who made a lot of money. These are people without money. They are striving for their livelihood, their existence. And I think that makes people very, very selfish. I'm going to share something that I probably shouldn't. I have said to my kids in the last month how self-centered I have become, that it's all about me and what I do now and the decisions I make. And I think when you get to be, as I assume these people are at least my age or older, I think that is true. You become very self-centered and your needs become very important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it was a big change of life. Izzy, Judy, and then Meryl.
After listening to all this, I have one major thing to say, and that is the name of it is Minyan. And Zalman wants to continue the tradition of the Orthodoxy, and the Minyan is the most important thing to him in the world. It's stated over and over again. He wants 10 people to be there. He doesn't care who they are. No, he doesn't care. And if you can say a tradition has to be continued on as long as you have 10 people, in a way, I understand what he's saying. If the Minyan and Orthodoxy and tradition is the most important thing, you need 10 bodies there. He's not talking about their characters. He's talking about their body. And if they choose to be in a Minyan, they're praying or whatever. I don't know. I just thought that was very important. And that was his goal, to get these people that was his whole goal, was to get people to go into that housing place for people who would join the Minyan. It was very religious and tradition. I thought that was very important. What bothered me was the judgment about the homosexual and all the children and all that bothered me.
Judy.
There's a quote on the last sentences of 466. The synagogue swelled with beautiful and conflicting prayer. God in his heaven was left to sort it out. And I think that's what we have to do. I think that's what the story wants us to do. We have to sort it out. We have to look at the issues, the conflicts, the situation, and we have to sort it out. I think that's a worthy effort for an author. And I agree with Lynn that we all come to it with our own experiences, because that's what it is. But I think he is correct in recognizing that there is conflicting prayer in synagogue. There's conflicting prayer on everything, but it's also in synagogue too.
Yeah. Wait a minute, Judy. Merle.
Okay, so I've heard it said that Israel will be a country and certainly has become a country when there are criminals and prisons and all kinds of bad people that are in every country. And I think that's what was kind of what he was trying to say in the Minyan, that we accept everybody. It's part of who we are. It's part of our religion. And I thought the narrator said something very important too about who would come to this synagogue. He said, most of the old Jews came because they were drawn by the nostalgia for ancient cadences. But the narrator says, I came because I was drawn by the nostalgia for old Jews. In each case, the motivation was not tradition, but history. So we're always evolving. And I think that's what the narrator is kind of showing, how this religion is evolving, this old Orthodox group, orthodoxies and all. And these people sat through 3-hour services. I don't know if you've ever sat through a 3-hour service, but
Yes, I have.
yes, it's not like at Makom Solal. So these people really wanted to be there. The fact that there are people who are liars and he was saying he would accept. I just think he wants to keep the religion going. And by the way, while I'm on the screen, I just want to say something about 2 months ago when you guys read.
I was just gonna call on you, and I brought up your email, Merle, so you could tell people about the nose.
Really fast. The story, The Counterpart, where the man lost his nose, was a complete parody of a short story by Nikolai Gogol called The Nose. And if you look it up in Wikipedia, it'll explain the whole thing. But it was a social satire about a guy who loses his nose, and he sees his nose walking down the street as an adult-sized person in a fancy overcoat, wearing insignias indicating that the nose was now of a higher social rank, higher civil service, and he was scared to even talk to him. But it was just a satire about Russia in the 1860s. And she borrowed this story today about a guy who was losing confidence. How's he going to go to this interview? How's he going to get a new job? And the counterpart is the guy in the modern story is the counterpart of the guy in Nikolai Gogol's story. And that's what this whole story was about. It was a parody of another story called The Nose. But if you just go to Wikipedia and look up The Nose, you'll see.
I put the link in the chat. If
Okay.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just sorry I wasn't there.
Thank you.
I was
That's very interesting.
Major in college. So when I read this story, I thought, oh, it's a parody of The Nose,
Yeah.
but you didn't know that.
The funny thing is, I post our discussions on YouTube, and someone commented on YouTube that it's a parody of The Nose, which of course I already knew because Meryl told me.
Hello?
All right,
So that's
Susan.
all I wanted to say about that.
Thank you.
Susan, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, I don't know, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but, we raised our children in Aurora, Illinois. There was one congregation that served Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox, but it was really leaning somewhere between Conservative and Orthodox. My daughters could not have, when they were bat mitzvahed, it had to be on a Friday night. They couldn't read from the Torah. I mean, we're totally different than when my son had his bar mitzvah. But the minyan was so important to people that after my son was bar mitzvahed, because we lived only 2 or 3 blocks from the synagogue. My son got called so often when there were people that needed to say Kaddish, and there weren't 10 men to do it. My son would get called, Jeff, can you come to the synagogue? And we would, of course, if it was at night, I wasn't going to let him walk by himself when he was 13 years old. And we would have to drive him there where no one else was driving, of course. I mean, and so if I have, the feelings I have about Orthodox Judaism come from those experiences. But the minyan was so important to this group of people, but it was never women. No woman could. And so when you brought up, Judy, about the fact that women, I mean, this whole book was about men.
Yeah. And that a couple of things. One, occasionally I go to Mariah and they always stand up and do this plea for a Minyan. And I've been this close to saying, standing up and saying, when you count women, I'll come. But, if I was counting on saying Kaddish and I got there and I was the 10th and there were 9 men and we couldn't do Kaddish, I would be, there'd be smoke coming out of my ears. But that's why I belong in a Reformed congregation. The other thing about the Minyan is that, and I think, I don't know if in 2024 you would lump, homosexuals and thieves, and it was really kind of that grouping is not very complimentary. And so it's interesting to see. Again, I think he was showing us generational and how it affects with how we look at homosexuality. I started looking at him. He is married. He has a wife. He lives in Toronto, because I was like, is he a homosexual? Like, is this his experience? But I don't think it is. So yeah. Judy.
I have a gay son, and I'm telling you, there was nothing in that
Yes.
story that led me to believe they were homosexual. Because I know a homosexual, and I know homosexual people, and nothing in there was like homosexual.
Except that Herschel and Itzhak were from a different generation. When you don't talk about it, and it's just so different. And I think that even casually talking about it in a group book, again, my mother was in a group book, in a book group these many years. She's 90. And I mean, I can ask her if they ever talked about it, but I'm going to say probably not. And it's just, you have to remember to look at it from eyes from a different decade. Our eyes are from this decade. Lynn and then Judy.
What I find so interesting is that a critical essay you read us on this story, we sort of dismissed that topic straight on, and they just focused almost entirely on it. So again, that is an example of people coming to a story with their idea of what the story means, and they took it from this homosexual relationship.
Yeah.
And if you read a lot of literary criticism, that's the case. I mean, if somebody has a predisposition for a particular area, that influences their interpretation of stories. So I think it's perfectly normal that I disagree with them focusing so much on that, but that's their preference.
Yeah. Judy.
The essence to me was they showed you what love was, and
right,
homosexuals have love, but so do regular people. And this relationship was one of love and compassion. The reason I think, Lynn, that they changed the focus of the movie or the play is that financially you can make a lot more money if you go the other way and not focus on what he did. And I know from my son has acting background and has acted in many things, in movies and films and TV. And I know that they do this because the producers want to make money. It sells.
Yes, right.
But so I don't necessarily feel that the play was a reflection of the story, or from my perspective, it wasn't.
Well, look at Maestro. If you saw that movie, that was totally aimed at his homosexuality and his sexual life. And there are a lot of people that were upset about this.
Right.
They were expecting.
Right. I don't think the family was. And I think that because it was the personal part of his life that, maybe some people were surprised. And in a certain way, it was like a love story and not, about his career. And the one thing I can leave you with is that, oh no, now I got to find it. No, that's not it.
Before you leave
Yeah,
that topic,
Yeah.
the Maestro was based on his daughter's memoir.
Yeah.
So it was through her eyes.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very interesting.
That is
And
because
they loved it. And, you know, all the controversies, the no's, they said that was okay. I mean, the family supported it. So I think that this story transcends the specificity of the characters' experiences, and it became universal. And I do think there's some universalities here. People brought up really great, Joyce, the middle school one, I'm going to remember. And you know, I think that it gives us a new way to look at, you know, how do you form a minyan, and that makes it extremely Jewish, and not universal. But Susan said creating community, and that's what we have here with the book group. And talking about community, the next time we meet is Wednesday, February 21st, and we're reading, I just had it open, I got too much open on my desk.
There are Jews in my
There are
house.
Jews in My House by Lara Vepner.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to make an adjustment to the schedule, and I'll do it later, because I think one of our March Wednesdays, I'm going to be in Israel. So I probably just cancel it and move the stories back. So
meet forward.
yes, I will move this. You are correct. I'm going to move it.
I'm not going to be here in March, so I want to, you know, if you move it to April, I'd be dedicated to you forever.
Yeah, we probably will. We probably will.
I won't be here in March either.
Okay. There's also, I have to look at the April, because I'm not going to do it during Passover. So
okay, that's fine.
But we'll start up. Oh, it's the 3rd and the 17th. That's perfect. It's before Passover.
Okay.
And I'll send you guys a new calendar and so on and so forth.
Wonderful.
And, thanks everybody. Gives me so much to think about when I think about the story. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you
was a great
all.
session. Thank you.
It was. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Beverly. Rose.